Well, hello there, and welcome back from spring break. Today, I want to do a few lectures this week, which is different. I haven't been doing them, but I wanted to start out with linking what we were talking about before the break, which was carrying capacity and the sustainable use sort of rule in natural resources, and link it to concepts of sustainable development, because a sustainable yield or sustainable use doctrine actually really informs sustainability. I want to link sustainability to sustainability planning and indicators in my next lecture, and then the one after that we're going to be talking about local governments and climate change planning. So it's a quick set of lectures. So just to start with the sustainable development definitions. First of all, the definition of sustainable development from 1987, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So, in other words, human development that balances economy, equity, and the environment. So it really treats these areas of human development as if they were natural resources, in the sense that we've been talking about with sustainable yield, so that you can use, there's a sort of a sustainable level of use and a sustainable and investment that's required in all of these areas to have sustainable development. So whether it's social, the social sort of capital, the environmental capital, or the economic stock of natural resource, or the stock of capital, each has a certain, you can have a certain income from it, and requires a certain level of investment. So there are these different value frameworks that underlie that definition of sustainable development, and they are the same sort of framework as that sustained yield, at the large scale. So intergenerational equity is almost, sorry, there's crackling in the kitchen. Intergenerational equity is making sure that each generation has some possibility of quality of life, right? And right now that's, especially with climate change, that's kind of not happening. Right now we're not really taking care of our development for future generations. But the principle is that we ought to make sure that our children have the ability to live a life that's of equal number of choices or freedoms that we have had. So sustainable development itself as a concept was initially one of those treaty concepts where, people will sign on to it because they have a slightly different definition of it in their own minds. So a more financial community kind of definition of it is that you're going to see the sustainable growth would be a rate of growth that sustains profit to investors over time, whereas a protectionist might see a condition of sustainability as requiring a certain number of natural systems and things left as they are for future generations. So in that sense, sustainable development or sustainability is sort of an umbrella kind of definition, in that there's all these kind of areas of disagreement underneath it. This makes it a fuzzy definition, which drives some people insane, but it also allows you to bring more people in under the umbrella. And that's one of the really important things that we need to do with dealing with climate change. We need to bring more people under the umbrella so we can at least start talking, continue talking, possibly make some changes. So that's why it's one of the things I think is really interesting about the definition of sustainable development from 1987 through till today. Then there's certain things that are outside of being sustainable. So there's certain things that we can agree are unsustainable. A rational economist could look at the economics of things like we were doing earlier in the semester and decide that the best solution would be to liquidate a specific natural system, depending on the discount rate. Now, so we've talked about discount rate before and how it devalues the future. And so you could rationally, using a discount rate, decide that the future wasn't worth it in a certain natural area. I don't think that there's a definition of sustainability that says that kind of explicit decision would be okay. And then another old definition from 1967, where some growth in real income damages the quality of life, social, ecological, cultural, and aesthetic, then growth has a larger cost. And we talked about that earlier in the semester when we were talking about the externality costs of things. The conditions where a society might be having more money and having less quality of life or health or some other valued thing, those are unsustainable conditions, definitionally, I would say. Now, I want to just, again, I'm hearkening back. This is the point in the semester where the things that we learned earlier in the semester start to come back again. So that's got to be a bit of a relief. Can't be a constant stream of new things. So there is actually, there's definitely a long tradition of economic definitions of sustainability. And so the capital stock kind of tradition with an income flow it's an economic approach to defining sustainability. And that's very strong within the different definitions. So say it might be a condition in which future generations have an equivalent stock of capital or productive capacity, so that we're just living off the income. That would be using an economic framework. The one I referenced at intergenerational equity is based more on rights or freedoms. Future generations have equal rights to self-determination, which practically is equal amounts of all stocks that they can then choose what to do with. So we're not choosing for them that, plastic, the cash value of the plastic is equal to the cash value of the dolphins. And rather they get to make decisions about how much plastic and dolphin is relatively worth to them. Carrying capacity. And this is the one that is most worth. This is the reason I put sustainable development in with carrying capacity in our framework movement for this class. Sustainable development is a condition in which human society lives within the ecological carrying capacity of the earth. So our last unit, we were talking about sustainable yield, and we looked at the example of fish. So I'm just going to sort of hearken back to this, because this is the metaphor where there's some level of fish that can be taken as a sort of an income each year, leaving the stock or the reproductive ecological capacity to produce the same every year. And we know from last unit that can be overestimated, but that is the idea from natural resource economics. From an economic capital point of view, it's actually a similar kind of concept, that the creation of a quantity of capital sufficient to be productive requires ongoing investment. That's a capital stock. So fish in the economic sense are a capital stock. So the process of production usually means that you have to maintain your capital, you have to maintain your machinery, you have to maintain the watershed where your water comes from. There's a certain amount of maintaining to make a productive stock. So that is, in economic terms, it's called, you can call it depreciation, you can call it a maintenance cost. You have to somehow invest back in your capital stock on an annual or, whatever the schedule is. So a capital stock in which investment over the year was sufficient to maintain its productive capacity is a sustainable stock. That means one that you're maintaining and you're not letting it degrade. So if you think about what would that mean for a field? Would that mean a field where your investment in the soil was equal to or more than the effect of erosion? That might be a sustainable capital stock. So this is just I think the timber value is another, it's another natural capital stock kind of example where you're including a sort of an agricultural soil thing. So you have to maintain timber harvest. You also have to maintain soil productivity. And there may be other dimensions, like you want to have an age class that ensures that future generations will have some large timber to make larger things with. They won't have to only have wood for toothpicks and chopsticks. So sustainable development in a capitals framework is a condition in which future generations have an equivalent level of capitals. Very stock and flow. And then there's an argument about the extent of substitutability, and I referred to that with the dolphins and the plastic. Some natural capitals can't be replaced, and others might be substitutable. So what that means is, if you were to deplete, if you were to deplete the cod stock off the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, could you replace it with a similar, white-fleshed fish from the Pacific Ocean? That's what we're doing now. When we deplete a capital stock, we're substituting it with another thing. So does that meet? The question here is that a sustainable solution? Can you say, okay, well, we might use up all the tuna, but we can substitute tofu? So both Roseland and Daly. Roseland is this is a textbook that I use when I teach sustainable communities in the fall. Daly is a theorist in the field that's been around since the 80s. They both argue strongly against the idea of substitutability. It's a replacement. You can even, some economists argue that you can replace natural capital with man-made capital. But it's a pretty important part of the definition, whether you think that these stocks are substitutable or not. So where that comes back into our definition, so strong sustainability is where all stocks of natural, human, and economic capital have equal productive value for successive generations. And weak sustainability is where the total value of productive capacity is the same for successive generations. Which is a sort of I think it's a sort of a funny idea to imagine that you can substitute many natural capitals for economic capitals. We do have a bit of a problem in our system with growth, and we talked about that when we were talking about how we could use cost-benefit analysis and how we could use economic valuation. And it comes back around to this discount rate and the fact that economically we discount the future as if our children don't matter, as if future generations don't matter. It's kind of how how capital investment works, and it's kind of a fundamental problem in how we organize economic value. And it fundamentally means that for us to have a growing economy, or I mean, for us to have what we think of as a healthy economy, and for our investment system to work, that the economy must grow each year. And when you're starting to come up against some natural capital limits, you have to ask, what room is there for growth? And I just wanted to bring this back to this. It's a similar question that's raised in the carrying capacity framework. And I have a really great image from Daly from a few years ago. So in the carrying capacity framework, sustainable development is a condition in which human society lives within the ecological carrying capacity of Earth. Now this fundamental definition is one that will carry through from this unit to the next one. Ecological, what are our ecological limits? How can we figure out what we need to do to sustain ecological function within a natural, within the economic part of the ecology, which is our natural resources. So we talked about this carrying capacity concept. It's kind of the sustainable use concept in a different, it's used more typically in wildlife circles. The number of individuals supported in a given area, so that's how much food and sunshine and water is there in a given area, such that the social, cultural, and economic environment is not damaged. So you can imagine this for cows on a field. You can imagine this for people in an agricultural region. How many? Probably grazing cows. You know, at some level, they'll be overgrazing and it'll damage the soil, and then it will actually, there won't be as much capacity for the cows the next year. You can achieve the same things with human beings. You can have too many human beings depending on a fixed region, and you can damage the soil, and you know, the way the soil takes in water, you can damage all that, so that you actually can support fewer human beings on that area the next year. So it can be improved by technology and get smaller from environmental degradation, a carrying capacity of a given area. So here's like I say, from today's hunter. So this is kind of how the carrying capacity metaphor is. You know, the bucket, or the sort of container of water, is the area, and then the part of the population that is coming out of that tap is the part that's taken away by hunting, and you have all kinds of other factors that control or, you know, limit the population, and then you have the factors that make the population support the population, like good habitat and ecological function. So sunshine and habitat equals the carrying capacity, or the population that can be supported. Now, at some level, that's the condition that people are in on the planet. You know, we have an income of sunshine. That's the thing that comes into the earth every year. We have a habitat, a certain amount of soil and water, and then we have a population. So we do have, there is a carrying capacity for us on the earth. And I said I had this picture that I loved, and it's not a new picture. This is from Daly, and I can't find the reference, but it's some of the early, you know, it's related to some of the earlier work on limits to growth and common good and those kinds of articles. So basically, we used to be able to think, we didn't used to have to think about the fit of the economy with the ecosystem. That's that small box on the top, where we could, you know, we're taking a certain amount of matter and energy into the economy, and a certain amount of matter and energy are coming out of the economy, and it has a sort of a relationship to that larger ecosystem, the larger carrying capacity of sunshine, water, air, and land, that didn't really affect the overall carrying capacity of the Earth. Whereas now we are kind of in the full world condition, which is the picture on the bottom, where our economy, the human economy, is taking on a greater and greater share of the matter and energy, capacity or productive capacity of the Earth. And then the outputs, the stuff that comes back out of the economy and back into the Earth's ecosystem, takes up a greater and greater share of the Earth's capacity to deal with it, waste, pollution, that kind of thing. Meanwhile, we have the same level of solar energy coming into the world. So right now we are in a full world situation for many things. So the question of, in some ways, say, how do we return to a more sustainable level of resource use? And certainly with the topic for this week, the carbon cycle, how do we return to what could potentially someday be a sustainable level of carbon intake and output? That is the sort of question for all of us, really, in a way. So carrying capacity is a way to think about what our limits are. So, and this is, people have been talking about this probably since, I don't know of any large scale popular discourse of it before the 70s, before Limits to Growth came out. And we do keep making efficiencies with certain things and using fewer material resources for some products, but it's really clear that in some ways we are outside of the carrying capacity of the Earth's ecological system already. So that's that. Oh yes, the variables. So there are some variables in carrying capacity. So different technologies, like organizational and physical capacity, capital, can be employed to yield different levels of production from the same stock of natural capital. So for example, if people can work collaboratively, using like one set of buildings and things to produce, say we have one community chicken house, if we can figure out how to socially organize that so that we can share the eggs, then we don't need the same amount of material resource and sunshine to build the house, to build the chicken house. So there's ways that organizational and physical capacity can give us different solutions. And that's one of the huge variables in sustainability, because right now, for example, the carbon outputs are come much more intensely from the richer countries. So if the richer countries could reduce their per capita carbon outputs, we might be in a far different situation as a planet. So, and there's our economy, we typically measure things in dollars, and there is great variability in the natural capital content of dollars. So, and this comes back around to substitutability. So this is the arena that we're in defining sustainability. If our economic productivity in dollars were a function of our natural resource input, in other words, if it was some amount of dollars produced the same amount of sunshine, then if the dollars recommended the amount of sunshine that was in a product, then the economy would definitely have a limit and could not get any larger. But we develop ways of valuing things that really bear only a most tenuous relationship to the way they're produced out of the natural world. And there are some forms of economic value that have minimal natural capital input to them. And so in that way, there's some elasticity in the amount to which we can grow. So where is the hope in this dismal situation? Well, hopefully we can figure out a way to redesign our community economies so that we do things that value our children and grandchildren and their lives. So, but right now, I'm just say right now I'm not feeling very hopeful. But right now things look pretty bad. I'll just say that. So my next lecture is on the relationship between sustainability and indicators. So, thanks.